where it was talking about he was talking about God in the Old Testament being a little more harsh, if you will, or judgmental, as opposed to Jesus, and that's what I was saying. Yeah, I have some of it is kind of hard to see a very, fire and brimstone, if you will, just because the older I get, the more I can understand people's shortcomings. And then if I'm talking about God, I mean, in my view, God is, he's all knowing. He's, so he's going to understand why we do the things we do. I guess is kind of what Jesus' teachings were. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak type thing, so.
Right, that's very true. And, another way to think about like some of those harsh Old Testament things is perhaps, once again, maybe for that time period and for that culture,
I think I know where you're
maybe
going.
that is the best God could do for those like human children. And I say children meaning in the sense of like maturity.
Yeah. The very
And
broad
maybe that
sense
was
of it.
just the way it was then, because it was a barbaric time.
That's a very good point.
Yeah, how I treat my 2-year-old is much different than how I'm rearing my 7-year-old at like real time right now. My how I'm gonna talk to my 2-year-old is much different than my 7-year-old. So that is
and
very.
If humanity was much younger,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
That's a really
cool and there's this idea in the Baha'i faith, just because it kind of ties into what you're saying about our understanding of truth in God being always kind of relative to our current understanding, right? And that's in contrast to saying there's absolute truth, like with a capital T or in all caps, where there are people, I think a lot of times religious people, who will say like, I have religious truth, it is in my book, this is it. And I've struggled to understand what they're saying because of what you guys were just talking about. Like, but how could that be? If that is true, that you have truth, that means you're no longer learning anything new. That means that your understanding of prayer 10 years ago must be identical to your understanding of prayer now. In God.
Right.
But if you say there is absolute truth, but my understanding of it is always kind of evolving and relative to where I'm at, that makes sense to me. And like Damien said, like understanding your children, you don't give the same advice to them at the same time.
Right.
So I think in this Baha'i talk I watched, when he was talking about this concept of absolutism versus being more relative, I think he said it in here that when you take a group like an ISIS, who believe firmly they have absolute truth, then they feel justified in chopping people's heads off, right? And I think you see that in a lot of that kind of extremist view is this belief of absolute, I have the truth, I own it.
Right.
Whereas if you have more of the view I think us three are putting forward, it leads much more to like, well, I want to understand where this person is at.
Why are they doing that?
And I was there once, right? And do I really know that I'm right now?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And I think it leads to much better outcomes and being able to get along with people.